This is Witness Radio with Ryan Muniak, where you learn biblical evangelism from real-life encounters.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Our feedback line is 513-900-8070, and the website is witnesstalkradio.org. Don't forget to subscribe to Witness Radio on your favorite podcast app. This episode of Witness Radio is brought to you by Audible. I know you like listening to stuff because you're listening to me right now. So go to witnesstalkradio.org/audible and sign up for a free audiobook and 30-day trial today. Today, I'm excited to share the airwaves with Bodie Hodge, a speaker, writer, and researcher at Answers in Genesis. He's recently co-authored A Flood of Evidence with Ken Ham to answer some of the top questions about Noah's flood. Bodie has a master's degree in mechanical engineering, and he's been teaching apologetics to teens and adults for years. Bodie, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, it's great to be on the show.
Bodie, tell us a little bit about you, and specifically, share with us how you were saved.
Well, you know, my story goes back a long time. You know, I'm getting old. You can see me here in the studio. I'm going bald. That gives you a lot of history there. But, when I was 9 years old, that's when I got saved. I received the Lord. I'd been chatting with the pastor. I grew up in a moderately Christian home, and I really started to understand, what the gospel meant, and received Christ as Lord and Savior. And you know what? I grew a little bit, but then I would suggest that I was actually quite stagnant in my faith for quite some time. I really just didn't grow like I should have. And it wasn't until my college years that I really started to have, some of those crises of faith, where you step back and you say, is the Bible really true? Is it not? What's going on here? And you start to look at some of those questions in a lot deeper fashion. Now, I know some people hit those phases a lot earlier than I did. But, I started to get in there and started to realize, hey, the Bible is true from beginning to end, and God's Word can be trusted. And I'll tell you what, at that stage, my faith really started to explode. There's a lot of history in that, but those are just some of the highlights at my salvation testimony.
Okay, so let me ask you this. What resource did you go to back then to firm up your faith? Today we've got Answers in Genesis, ICR, Creation Today with Eric Hovind. We've got all different types of ministries focused on apologetics. What did you have back then?
Well, when I first started asking questions and trying to seek some answers, that goes all the way back in the junior high and high school years. And really all I had was the Bible. And so I would look at the Bible and I'd read the Bible and I would search the Bible. And when I was younger, this is in the days before good, solid search programs and stuff like that as well. I bought myself a little concordance and I could look up stuff, that way. And so I did everything I could to get in the Word of God to try to figure some of these things out, but I still struggled. It wasn't until I had completed college and I was teaching at the university, and I ran across this book, The Great Dinosaur Mystery Solved, that had just come out from Ken Ham. That was my first introduction to Answers in Genesis. And I got a copy of that book, and unlike the other books that I just picked up on dinosaurs, that one actually said, hey, let's go back to the Bible. Let's see what the Bible says. Let's use that as our basis, as our framework to look at dinosaurs. And that thrilled me because I'm like, now that's the right way to do it. You got to go back to the Bible. Let the Bible be the authority. Some of the other books that I'd bought at the time, they just took the evolution, the millions of years types of concepts that the world has been teaching, and they tried to mix it with their Christianity. And so I realized, hey, there's a big problem there. So I was really thrilled when I got that book, The Great Dinosaur Mystery Solved. Now, I'll tell you, I was pretty excited about that book. And at that same stage, I moved and I took a job at Caterpillar in Peoria, Illinois. And I was working as a test engineer up there. And I got up there and I went to a local Christian bookstore and I'm like, boy, I need to get some more of this stuff, right? And so, I had them pull up this chart that had all these book titles and things like that. And I'm like, hey, look up Ken Ham. I want to get something else from Ken Ham. And of course, there's a big listing of different books and resources that he had. And I was looking at the list, and all it is the name. That's all that was on this computer listing. And I was like, well, he did really good at dinosaurs. And they're like, well, there's the Great Dinosaur Mystery Solved. And I said, well, I've got that one. And they said, well, there's another one here. It's D is for dinosaur. And I'm like, ooh, that sounds really good. Let's get that one. So I ordered that book, and it came in the mail. And come to find out, it was like a book for kindergarten, first graders, to teach them the alphabet and things like that. And I'm like, really? And I'm like, okay, I got to search out this Ken Ham. And, the website was becoming fairly popular around that time. And I hopped on the internet, and I was able to kind of connect with the ministry at that stage.
Okay. And that website was answersingenesis.org, which
That's
it
correct.
still is today, right?
Yep, answersingenesis.org. From there, I branched out. I've utilized things from the Institute for Creation Research. I got some good friends there and other creation ministries as well. And you mentioned Creation Today with Eric Hovind. I've been on that show as well. Good friends with Eric. And, there's a number that are out there that are excellent. I'm actually a member of the Creation Research Society. Okay. And, some of these guys have done a lot of work going back to the 60s. But, back in my earlier years, I just wasn't familiar with some of these guys yet.
Yeah. It's wonderful to see what the Lord is doing now with all of the different apologetic ministries out there. I know Eric is spearheading a program for the Creation Network where it's putting together this whole big search engine and website of networking all the different ministries together, which I think will be great in helping to equip the saints.
Yeah, in fact, one of the fascinating aspects of that, there's a lot of local creation ministries all over the country, and in fact, all over the world. And a lot of these guys, they don't have connection with each other, and that's what Eric's trying to do. He's trying to bring them together. Here at the Ministry of Answers in Genesis, we're the largest Christian apologetics ministry that's out there. And so we have a big reach, but we can't do everything. We don't have local branches all over the place. So we want to encourage these guys to do it. In fact, in our past, one of the things we've done is run creation colleges where, a lot of different people who are interested in becoming creation speakers will come and we'll help them hone their skills and help equip them with different resources so they can really step up their local creation ministry. So we do encourage that.
Wonderful. So let me take a step back real quick. You actually got your start in mechanical engineering, not in biblical apologetics. What made you go from engineering to apologetics?
I got the degree. I got a bachelor's and master's of science degree in mechanical engineering, and I ended up teaching at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. I used to teach engineering, and I enjoyed it. I loved teaching the kids, although at the time I was about the same age as the kids. It kind of confused kids when I go in the classroom. All right, everybody take your seats. And they're like, really? Some of these guys were older than I was. But, I enjoyed teaching. I liked doing that. And from there, like I said, I took a job at Caterpillar, and I started working as a test engineer. So I got a chance to go out in industry and do some of that. And I enjoyed that as well. I mean, being a test engineer for a place like Caterpillar is an incredible job. You get to go out and take large pieces of construction equipment and break it. I mean, it's a great job. But, of course, you have to write up reports and take data and things like that and analyze all that. But during that time, I'd actually been working with the youth. When I was at Carbondale and teaching at the university, I showed up at the church I'd been going to one evening. They have their kids' Bible studies. They have Sunday schools and different things like that, And so I would get involved, and I would help out from time to time. One day I showed up, and they said, hey, junior high kids do not have a teacher. Can you run in there? So I ran in there, and we made it through a lesson, just trying to fill in. Well, I walked out, and they said, you're the permanent teacher now. And I was like, oh, now I figure out how these people get these jobs. So I've become their teacher. Well, I took that Great Dinosaur Mystery Solved that I first had, and I went back and I actually bought copies for each of the kids in the class, and we went through it. And the reason for that is I just asked the kids, I said, hey, what do you want to learn? Do you guys want to go through a book of the Bible? Do you guys have questions? Boom, all the hands went up. Yeah, we got questions. I'm like, well, what are your questions? What about the Big Bang? What about evolution? What about dinosaurs? What about millions of years? How do we know the Bible's true? Those are the types of questions these junior high kids were asking. And I'm like, you know what? Those are great questions. And at that stage, I had been struggling with some of those questions. So one of them that I had an answer to at that stage was the dinosaurs. I'd recently gotten that book. And so that's the reason I took them through that. They really enjoyed that. In fact, I've had conversation, at least with a couple of those kids, even in recent times, because they've stayed connected in Christianity, and they even stayed connected with this ministry one way or another. But I really enjoyed teaching those kids. Well, then I moved up to Caterpillar and started getting involved in a church there. And I got involved with the youth and started running my own website there locally. I'd have kids come in and ask me the toughest questions. If I didn't know, I was going to go find the answer. I'd read it on Answers in Genesis website or ICR, and I'd take some of these technical articles and I'd bring it down to 1 or 2 paragraphs to put it on the website. And the kids started kind of distributing that website. One day I hopped on the Answers in Genesis website, and there was a little link that said jobs. I'm like, what kind of jobs do they have here? So I clicked on it, and one of the jobs was to answer questions, email, snail mail, phone calls from a theological and scientific perspective. They wanted somebody with a science degree. And I'm like, wow, I'm doing this stuff for fun. So I applied, and they put me through a pretty rigorous interview process. But
I remember that.
And they hired me. So I've been here ever since.
You mentioned a couple of times Ken Ham's book about dinosaurs. You obviously have this appreciation for Ken Ham and his ministry. But what I want to know is, what is it like being related to him?
Well, when I first got that book, I had no idea that one day I would ask to marry his daughter. I met his daughter when I moved out here to the ministry, and we got to know each other. And, we started dating, and now we've gotten married, and we've got 4 wonderful kids. But, working with Ken is actually a joy. It's great, just to garner from his wisdom. I mean, he's got 30 years plus of ministry. And, that's really helpful for someone like me, who, I've been involved in ministry now for about 15 years. If you go back to some of the early stuff I'd been involved in. So, just garnering from that wisdom and his experience going all over the world and doing creation teaching and apologetics ministry, I'll tell you what, that has been invaluable for me. But he's been in fact, he's been a great father-in-law.
Okay.
No sense in rambling. He's a great guy.
Okay. So there's no secret guy behind the face of AIG that we don't want anyone to know about.
No.
He is as we see him.
Yep. He's right out there, One thing people may not realize is Ken can sometimes be kind of a quiet guy. For a guy who gets up and speaks all the time, people are used to seeing him speak and all that. But, sometimes he just likes to sit around, do some reading and, things like that. So he's a pretty humble guy.
Okay. So you say that you've been in ministry for roughly 15 years now. Have you had any hardships or troubling times in ministry? What were those like?
Oh, there's always issues that pop up in ministry. We've seen that over the years. And it just, as an example, here at the Ministry of Answers in Genesis, when we opened the Creation Museum, boy, we got all sorts of attacks and things from atheists, from Christians alike. When we opened the Ark, same sort of thing. I mean, we see these types of pieces of strife. With a ministry this big, yes, there's always going to be in-house debates. There's going to be issues. One of the best things about ministry is the people. One of the worst things about ministry is the people. We like to put it that way. Because, people, they don't always agree with each other, and that leads to strife. One of the great things about working in Christian ministry, though, is just as a general trend, even when we do have that type of strife, usually, we still recognize, hey, we're Christian brothers and sisters, and we can work through that thing. Where I could see those same type of issues out in the world would cause some pretty big problems. What
would you say is one of the most memorable moments in ministry that you've had?
Well, I don't know if I could pinpoint one. I mean, let me just throw out a couple of things just to make you think. When I came into ministry, I've since been sent to Machu Picchu and Sacsayhuaman down in Peru. I got to speak down there. I've been to the Great Barrier Reef. I've been down the Grand Canyon. So when I start thinking of those things, it's like, well, what's really the best? I don't know if I could actually pinpoint a single one. The ones that seem to pop up are the things that you don't expect. Let me give you just a fun example of this. I went to a church. I showed up there in the middle of winter, and I mean it was bone cold. I get to this church, and apparently the night before the furnace had broken at the church. So we get in there, and I mean, I am not kidding. It was below freezing in there, and it was so cold. But there's all these people that showed up, and they wanted to have a seminar. I was so cold I couldn't even run the computer because my fingers were so cold, and I have a presentation. But people just rushed, people who lived nearby brought a whole bunch of blankets, and they passed out blankets, and everyone's cuddled up under these blankets. All you could see was their face. And I'm up there, and I mean, I'm cuddled up like you wouldn't believe, and I'm trying to run my presentation, and we get through it. But that turned out to be some incredible ministry. We had a great time there, even though it was freezing, it was cold. We were not expecting those conditions, but the people really enjoyed it. Those are things that I really think, hey, you know what? I look at the Apostle Paul and Peter and some of the things they had to endure back in the first century. You know what? We can deal with those sort of things as well. And the gospel, no matter what, still goes through front and center. So,
amen. Man, I don't know that I could deal with that. Heat, no problem. Cold, I don't like the cold.
Yeah, it was an experience. I'll say that.
All right. Well, we will be right back with more from Bodie Hodge after the break. You're listening to Witness Radio.
All right, so I've got a copy of Bodie Hodge's newest book, written by him and Ken Ham, called A Flood of Evidence. And they've both signed this book, and they want to give this signed copy away to one lucky person just for listening to Witness Radio. Go to witnesstalkradio.org by March 31st. 2017 to sign up for the giveaway. You could win a free book, A Flood of Evidence, signed by the authors Bodie Hodge and Ken Ham.
Do you enjoy listening to Witness Radio? Would you like to help us continue making great content for you? Then please visit witnesstalkradio.org/audible and sign up for a free 30-day trial of Audible. You'll get a free audiobook of your choice, and you'll be supporting this show. Need a suggestion? How about Raising Godly Children in an Ungodly World by Ken Ham and Steve Ham? It doesn't cost you a dime, but it's a huge help to us, and you get a free audiobook out of the deal. So go to witnesstalkradio.org/audible and start your free trial today.
Imagine Jesus walking onto your local college campus. What would he say? Would he be like Matthew chapter 9, seeing the people harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd, and say, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few? At Christian Collegiate Network, we are sending workers into the harvest. We are training students how to proclaim the glorious gospel. If you want to support our ministry at Christian Collegiate Network by becoming a campus leader or financially, go to changeyourcampus.com.
You're listening to Witness Radio.
Welcome back to Witness Radio. Remember, witnesstalkradio.org is where you go for more episodes. We are talking with Bodie Hodge, the author of A Flood of Evidence, a new book based around Noah and the Ark. Bodie, let's dig into this new book that you wrote with your father-in-law, Ken Ham. Who's the book for, starting out, and what's it about?
Well, the book, we wanted to have a layman's book, a book just for the general person in the pew, but also for Christian leaders, for elders, for Sunday school teachers, where people ask all sorts of questions about the ark. They ask them about the flood, and we just wanted to give them a standard answer without them getting lost in technical detail. But then we didn't want it so shallow it's like a kid's book. We wanted something that had some meat in it. So what we did is we put together these top questions that we get, and we wrote them out, and we wanted to have it nice and easy for people to understand. So that was our goal with this book. And I think we've kind of hit that mark pretty well, just from the testimonies we've been receiving from people who've been reading the book.
There's been really a big fascination lately surrounding Noah and the flood. I mean, we've had films produced. We've got other books that are coming out about Noah and the flood. Why did you think, you know what, we should throw another book out there all about Noah and the flood?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of books out there. There's a lot of resources on Noah's Ark and the flood. I like to read a lot of the more technical stuff, although I do like some of the fun books, some of the like the kids' books, maybe not for the little kids, but, I do like a lot of these resources, but we notice that we're just missing that one that's right in the middle, the average book that the average person can read. And that's one of the reasons we said, hey, we got to get this book out there because it really does fill a niche that we don't have. But, it's interesting. You brought up, some films. There was a Hollywood one that was a nightmare here recently.
Yeah, I believe the director said it was the least biblical film ever.
Yes, and that's the Noah movie that starred Russell Crowe. Yeah, Darren Aronofsky. And I tell you what, if they would have removed the name Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, nobody would have had any clue this had anything to do with the flood described in the Bible. That's how inaccurate it really was. So.
Wow. Since we're talking about the flood and Noah and the ark, would you be able to give us like a brief synopsis of the biblical timeline surrounding it?
Yeah, let's give you just an overall big picture. The flood itself occurred over the course of about a year. About 5 months of the water, you got the initial rain, 40 days and nights of rain. The rain doesn't actually officially end until the 150 a day. That's when the rain was restrained. You have about 5 months of the water going down and then about 2 months of drying time. So it's a pretty long flood when you think about it. I mean, just consider for a second being cooped up on this huge ark for about the course of a year with just your family. Mm. Would you be ready to get off that ark and have a break? Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people were, but
right.
But then we also have the countdown to the flood as well. Sometimes people look, what were the events leading up to the flood, the springs of the great deep bursting forth there? Some people thought, well, there's 120 years for Noah to build the ark. Actually, it wasn't 120 years for Noah to build the ark. That was the countdown to the flood. God said, hey, man is mortal. He's indeed flesh. He gave him 120 years. That's the countdown to the flood. But Noah wasn't told to build the ark at that time. Instead, when Noah was told to build the ark, the Lord said, hey, I want you to build an ark for you, for your sons, and for your sons' wives, also for Noah's wife in there as well. So that means Noah had to have his children. They had to be old enough to have wives. So we usually put a range in there about 55 to 75 years maximum for him to build the ark. It may well have been a lot less than that. And then, of course, the final loading phase was 7 days before the flood.
So that's the biblical timeline regarding the events of the flood. But there's been flood legends passed down from varying cultures throughout the centuries. So with all of those different legends, and many of them are conflicting one another, why should we trust the Bible account of the flood?
Well, the biggest difference is when it comes to the Bible, the Bible comes from God. The Bible is true by virtue of it coming from the God who is the truth. When we see these different other flood legends, we actually expect to see those. I see those as an excellent confirmation of the Bible's truthfulness. Think of it this way. As people go to different parts of the world after the events that occurred at the Tower of Babel, they take their history with them. Cultures all over the world have a creation legend, a creator legend. They have flood legends. They have Tower of Babel legends. We expect that because they took their history with them, but we also expect that they're not going to retain that information perfectly. They're going to deviate. Sometimes they're going to embellish the account. Sometimes they're going to lose information. Sometimes they're going to put local things into it. Like instead of the ark landing in the mountains of Ararat, they're going to pick a local mountain somewhere that they're going to try to insert into that account. So we do see those type of things, and we expect to see those things, but it's the Bible that records the true account.
Okay. And now looking through the book, I noticed that much of it talks about the age of the earth, millions of years. I thought this was a book about the flood. I mean, why do you guys spend so much time focused on millions of years in a book about a flood?
Well, a lot of people don't realize that the age of the earth is actually tied to rock layers. In the secular world, back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, people started to say, hey, let's look at rock layers, but let's leave the Bible out of it. Now, as soon as you leave the Bible out of it, you're leaving God out of it. And so what they did is they started looking at rock layers saying, well, maybe these rock layers were laid down slowly and gradually over long periods of time, perhaps millions and billions of years. So what they said was, no major catastrophes in the past. So in other words, they threw the Bible out, thus they threw the flood out, and they replaced the evidence of the flood with the idea of millions of years. So that's how it's tied in. We're all looking at the same rock layers. The question is that evidence of a flood of Noah's day, or is that evidence of slow, gradual accumulations over millions of years? And so that's how that relates to the age of the earth. Just to put this into practical terminology, if you go out there to a college that's promoting atheism and millions of years and some of these long ages, and you say, hey, there was a global flood that occurred a long time ago, they're going to say, no, you can't have a global flood. Well, why not? Well, because then we can't have millions of years, you see, because it destroys all their evidence for millions of years. So that's what it is. It's a battle over the same rock layers. It's just the question is the interpretation of those rock layers.
Gotcha. One of the things that you guys do in this book is you answer a lot of the common questions that come up in discussions and debates. And one of those questions that I've heard before is, where did all the water come from for the flood, and where did it all go?
Yeah, well, the Bible talks about the springs of the great deep bursting forth and the windows of heaven opening. So the springs of the great deep are the primary source of these waters. So it's probably subterranean waters, and it probably feeds the windows of heaven that are then coming down all over the place. Windows of heaven, we see that throughout the Bible. Many times that's used in a metaphorical fashion, like it's raining cats and dogs, or, the blessing comes from the windows of heaven. It's kind of a term like that. But the majority of the waters probably were subterranean that came out. And where they're at, they're still in the oceans today. That's where they've drained off to. The Bible talks about the mountains rising, the valleys sinking down to the place which God established for them. That's in Psalm 104. And so, when you have the mountains rising, the valleys sinking down, naturally the water is going to run off to its lowest position, which is going to be in the oceans today.
Another common objection, I guess, is only 8 people survived the flood. Why didn't God allow more people to be saved?
Well, I think the main reason is because of sin. Noah was the only one seen as righteous. He was blameless compared to those of his generation. And the other people, they had a chance to repent. The Lord gave him a 120-year countdown. He even sent Noah, a preacher of righteousness, to them. And yet only 8 people survived. When Noah was called onto the ark, he actually said, because you are righteous, you're coming on. So that just goes to show that people loved their sin more than they loved God before the flood.
As I just asked about, there only being 8 people survived, that means a lot of people died during the flood and a lot of animals died. Do we see any dinosaur fossils mingled in or mixed in with human fossils?
Well, that's a great question. I've gotten that question for years. In fact, I answered that question in a book we have called The Answers Book, Volume 1. It's one of the first books I was involved in. But we typically don't, and there's good reasons for that. I think humans, by our body form, we tend to float. When things drown, mammals tend to do that. If you think of other mammals, just the mammalian features, they tend to float, where reptiles would tend to sink. So just by the natural sorting power of water, they're going to be separated out into 2 different layers. There's other factors involved as well. When you look at these different rock layers, a lot of them were laid down based on where everything was at. In other words, the stuff at the bottom of the ocean, that's going to be the stuff laid down first. It's not going to flee to higher ground. Your shells aren't going to take off. So the stuff in that area is going to be buried first. Basically, where things are living is going to also play a major role into where things are buried. So, like for today, let's say there was a global flood today. What are the odds you and a lion are going to get buried together? It's pretty rare. Most of the lions are living elsewhere, and there's not too many people that live right there where the lions are. So, the odds of that are actually quite low. But here's another factor that I think a lot of people don't realize. How many people were actually living at the time of the flood? I've seen people throw out numbers of billions and billions of people, but I think those numbers are just grossly exaggerated. And the reason for it, there's only 10 generations from Adam to Noah. That's it, 10 generations. If you realize there's only 10 generations from Jacob's sons when they went down to Egypt to when Joshua leads them into the promised land. Joshua was in the 10th generation from there. And the Bible gives us numbers for that. And yet keep in mind that the Lord gave the increase to the Israelites while they were in Egypt. But there was about 600,000 men of fighting age. And if you double that, to account for women and then add a few more, that's still less than 1.5 million people. So it wouldn't surprise me if the population before the flood was quite small. Now, another thing that relates to that is the people before the flood, every thought of their mind was evil all the time. Now, God only gave a handful of commands there originally. One of those commands was to be fruitful and multiply. So people were defying God. If they're opposing God, they're not going to want to be fruitful. They're not going to want to multiply. They're going to want to defy God on that. Mm-hmm. And if you know anything about an evil culture, the first people who get attacked are usually the kids. Child sacrifice. I mean, we see that in our own culture today with abortion, which is just a form of child sacrifice.
Right.
People are wanting to make a name for themselves, not for their children. So it wouldn't surprise me if the population was actually low and declining at the time as well. That's a lot to digest right there.
Right. No, that's definitely a lot of interesting thoughts to ponder upon. And I think we're going to let the audience take a moment to ponder on that as we go to a commercial break. This is Witness Radio.
The children of Lima, Peru face many difficulties: hunger, neglect, abuse, and most importantly, a lack of the gospel. Heart of Christ Ministries seeks to bring the gospel and to fulfill the other needs of the children, please consider partnering with us. You can sponsor a child for just $25 a month, and there are many other ways to help. Please visit hofcm.org.
You know you should read your Bible every day, but things just seem to get in the way. How would you like it if someone else did the reading for you? Bible 365 is a new podcast that reads your daily dose of scripture for you. There's no annoying chapter breaks to distract you or personal commentary to confuse you. Just listen to God's Word on Bible 365 and you'll get through the whole Bible in 1 year. Go to muniakfamily.com/Bible 365 or find Bible 365 on your favorite podcast app.
You're listening to Witness Radio.
Welcome back again. We are talking to Bodie Hodge, the co-author of A Flood of Evidence, 40 Reasons Noah and the Ark Still Matter. And now we're talking about the flood and the ark. And speaking of the ark, Answers in Genesis has recently created or recreated the ark in the form of the Ark Encounter attraction. Why in the world did you guys decide to build a giant boat where there's no water?
Oh, we got plenty of water out here. It rains and it just runs all over the place. Yeah, we're in an area that gets extensive amounts of rain up here. But yeah, I know we built a great big Noah's Ark in the middle of a continent.
Right.
Who knows? Maybe Noah did that. But the reason that it's centrally placed here is actually strategic. The Cincinnati area here, a lot of people don't realize Cincinnati kind of grows into northern Kentucky. It starts to grow over here into Indiana. It's where 3 states come together. But the reason that we've selected this area is we are within 1 day's drive of 2/3 of the U.S. population, as well as most of Canada's population. So it's centrally placed for a good reason. People can get here fairly easily. So that was the number one reason for it. Now, I know it's kind of winter time here when we're recording this segment. And the fact is, when I drove in today, it was icing outside. And it's days like that I'm like, why didn't we build this in the southern part of Florida? I think those types of things. But, it is for location. We want to see as many people come to this as possible because we want them to understand that the account of the flood, the account of Noah's Ark is true. And hey, because that account is true, the message of the gospel that's founded in that same account, that biblical account, is also true. So we do it for gospel reasons.
Okay. And how do you guys get the gospel into this whole message about Noah's flood, about the ark?
Yeah, well, we have actual displays in there. As you go through Noah's Ark, it's not just an area that's going to smell like a bunch of pens and you see a bunch of animals sitting in it. We have some world-class exhibits in there. We have the gospel clearly outlined, and we're even going to be showing some video that really outlines the gospel as well. So, we put it there. It's also in a lot of the resources that you would get a hold of. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, to get the gospel in there to people. The good news of Jesus Christ. See, we want people to know that. And so we're going to try to hit it from a number of different avenues. But I'll tell you what, the exhibits really clearly outline this. It's pretty powerful.
Bodie, did you have any part in the creation of that attraction?
A little bit, but more minimal. We had plenty of other researchers that were heavily involved in it, and we'd look over some of their research and things like that. But, we've been working with people for many years on that. The design of the Noah's Ark that's utilized at the Ark Encounter actually goes back to an engineer named Tim Lovett. He's an engineer from Australia. And, he's been involved in looking at the structure and the shape of Noah's Ark for a decade. And, then we also had some other people looking at the content inside the Ark. Tim Chafee, has done an incredible job, putting together a lot of the signage and a lot of the things that are involved over there. And, we worked with, the grounds guy over there has done some incredible work outside of it. His name's Tim Schmidt. So if your name's Tim, you're probably going to be heavily involved at the Ark Encounter, right? Actually, we've had a lot of wonderful people. Patrick Marsh is the exhibit designer. We've had a lot of wonderful people to take up that banner and run with it. So my involvement has been minimal, but still somewhat involved behind the scenes.
Okay. So you brought up the shape of the ark, and that's been a little area of contention that I've seen over the past few years. Is some people are upset with Answers in Genesis because they made the ark look like a boat instead of a box. Why did Answers in Genesis decide to design their ark the way that it looks?
Well, believe it or not, a lot of that goes down to the structure of Noah's Ark. But you almost need to understand a little bit of history before we get to that stage. There's another question that pops up that's related to this that actually ties into the box shape versus the structural shape of Noah's Ark, and that's the question of how the animals fit on the ark. For the longest time, creationists were trying to answer that famous question from the skeptics, how'd you fit all those animals on the ark? And so what we did is we just took the dimensions in the Bible, 300 by 50 by 30 cubits, made it into a box shape, and okay, that's our volume. Let's try to fit the animals on there. And so for a long time, we were trying to answer that question. Well, once we answered that question, well, then all of a sudden, all the skeptics seemed to shift. They started to say, okay, fine, you could fit all the animals on the ark, but there's no way that box-shaped ark could possibly survive a global flood. Where those corners come together, it's sharp. Nobody would do that in the water, because as soon as the wind and the waves start hitting that sort of thing, it's going to just tear those corners right apart, and it's going to start leaking. You're going to sink. There goes the ark. And so it was at that stage that people like Tim Levitt said, okay, let's start looking at the structure a little bit more. There was a bunch of Korean engineers. There was a mixture of Christian and non-Christian, said, hey, let's look at the ratio of the dimensions. So they were the first ones to really start diving into the structure in a lot more detail. And they did structural studies. Noah's Ark actually fit beautifully between strength, comfort, and stability. I mean, it is that ratio of dimensions is incredible. The Navy, a lot of cargo ships actually mimic that ratio, which is fascinating. But Tim Levitt said, well, let's go one step further. You know, a lot of ancient ships of antiquity, stuff we pulled out of the Mediterranean, ancient Chinese ships, stuff we've seen from Scandinavia, all over the world, would have certain features on these ships that they had. And sometimes they would have a keel at the bottom. They'd have a bow fin, just different things that would actually grab the wind and the waves to make their ship more stable, particularly in rough waters. And so what Tim postulated was, he's like, okay, Noah lived 350 years after the flood. Shem lived 500 years after the flood, and they were master shipbuilders. Where did these people get all this incredible technology all over the world? And yet we lost most of that technology by the age of exploration. He said maybe Noah and Shem and some of these other, like Japheth or Ham, we don't know exactly how long they lived. Maybe they passed some of that technology on. And so he started saying, hey, maybe Noah's Ark utilized some of these features. So one of the things he did is he started doing some experimentation on a box-shaped ark, because you want the box-shaped ark to ride into the wind and the waves. When the wind and the waves are coming in a direction, you want the ark to ride into it. What happened was they put the box-shaped ark out there, and it would start to turn perpendicular and start to wobble, and sometimes flip over. Well, you don't want a Noah's Ark that's going to be flipping over. Right. So even though those dimensions are incredible, you still need to be able to deal with the wind and the waves. And so he started saying, well, let's take some of these ancient features, let's put them on the ark. And so he designed what we call the Levitt design for Noah's Ark. That's what the Ark Encounter is actually based on. A lot of times you see that bow fin up there, and people are like, oh, I see it. What those are utilized to do is to naturally grab the wind and the waves. So you have to keep in mind, Noah's Ark's a floater. It doesn't have a motor or an engine, to run it. It doesn't have a propeller. It doesn't have sails. It needs something natural to be able to grab the wind and the waves. So when he started doing the experiments with, a keel and bow fins and all these different features, it would actually correct itself in the wind and the waves as it's getting pushed along, which is some incredible research. So is the Levitt design the absolute shape of Noah's Ark? We don't know. But we know that, the Lord was involved in the design, so it wouldn't surprise us if there really were some pretty incredible things that even we haven't thought about that were involved in Noah's Ark. So we're still tentative with the shape of that, but it does let us know that, hey, structurally, there are some pretty fascinating features that were probably involved.
That is really neat. So speaking of not knowing exactly what the ark looks like, has the original ark ever been found, or at least pieces of it, parts of it?
Most people probably wouldn't ask that question if Noah's Ark's actually been found. That would be the find of the millennium. I mean, that would be a huge find. Believe it or not, researchers actually debate over where Noah's Ark landed. One of the most popular places is Mount Ararat. It's the biggest mountain over there in that whole region. It's a huge volcano. There's also a smaller volcano, which is also huge yet, called Lesser Ararat. And Mount Ararat stands more than 17,000 feet high. That's taller than any mountain over here in North America, just to give you an idea. So it's got a record of eruptions. I think they know about 5 or 6 eruptions from Mount Ararat going back for the past 2,000 years. Its last eruption was in the 1840s. So consider, had Noah's Ark actually landed somewhere in that area, most likely it's been buried by volcanic debris. Now, a lot of ancient literature actually points to a different mountain. Christians, Jews, Muslims, and a lot of their ancient literature would point to a mountain called Mount Judi. It looks like Mount Cudi, but it's pronounced Mount Judi. J-U-D-I is the way it kind of looks if we were to pronounce it that way, but it's C-U-D-I. And what it is a lot of ancient literature says that was actually the old Mount Ararat. That's where the Ark landed. It's about 6,000 feet high. Just to give the listeners an idea, think the Appalachian Mountains, about the height of some of those peaks. And that'd be a lot easier for animals to disembark, to go to different parts of the world. They're both in the same general region from each other. Mount Cudi is essentially across a big ravine area from where what we call modern-day Mount Ararat. And, the Muslims claim they took the last of the big beams from there about 1,000 years ago and utilized them in a mosque. So is that the absolute site? Still not sure. We published on that, and what I'd like to do is refer people to a ministry that actually deals with that in a lot more detail. That's the Associates for Biblical Research. They're an archaeology group. Some wonderful guys over there. Been good friends with Answers in Genesis for a lot of years. But they have some people on the Mount Ararat side as well as the Mount Judi side that kind of debate back and forth. So they're kind of the experts on some of this. So I'd refer people there if they want to find out some more about that debate.
Okay, and what's the website for those?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but if you just type in Associates for Biblical Research in a search engine, it should be the first thing that pops up.
Okay. Going back to the actual attraction of the Ark Encounter, there's been a lot of conflicting reports regarding the attendance numbers there. What's it really like? What do we have people going to the Ark?
Oh, we've got the numbers are actually a little higher than what we've been anticipating. See, it's a lot of people don't understand how it works in a lot of the tourist business. Most of your visitors actually come in the summer times, and most people come on Saturdays. But when you go throughout the winter months, just like what we see here at the Creation Museum, certain numbers dwindle, and we expect that. The worst months in the northern Kentucky, Cincinnati area for just about any place up here that's involved in tourism are going to be November through February. Mm-hmm. Naturally, nobody wants to go on vacation to the Cincinnati area when it's 2 degrees out.
Right.
And those are actually factored in when we look at population estimates, what we're expecting. But we've had more than 400,000 people show up in just a matter of months. And our numbers are actually higher than the projected days that we're looking at. So I think our numbers are going to be pretty close to spot on for what we're looking for first-year attendance by the time we finish a full year. So
you think that the Ark Encounter is going to hit the 1.2 million that was projected?
Yeah, remember, that's a minimum number, 1.2 to 1.4 million. I think it's going to hit that at this stage. So, that's just according to the numbers. We're actually probably a little higher than what we're, based on that projection, with the mm-hmm. numbers going, we're actually a little higher per day. So I think we can hit those numbers easily.
Is there any reason for people who have already visited the Ark Encounter? Is there a reason for them to come back?
Well,
do you have...
There's a lot actually in place. When we first designed the park, it's not just supposed to be a Noah's Ark. Yeah, we see certain elements with it already. We got the zoo back behind, which is actually being expanded. We got Imzara's kitchen, but we also have a walled city that's going up. And we're wanting to build a Tower of Babel, a first-century village. There's a host of things that we want in there. But what you need to do is you need to be able to filter people out. The last thing we want to do is have people come to the Ark, and we want them to go through and understand, hey, the Bible's true, and the gospel founded in that Bible is also true, and yet they're so crowded they don't get the message. So you need to be able to filter people out throughout the park into different areas. And so we've got a number of things planned. I'm just giving you just a taste of some of the things that are going to be involved out there. But it really is the kind of place you want to come back to. And we've seen the same thing here at the Creation Museum. You know, we've had people who came the first year, and now they come back and they're like, where'd all this stuff come from? Mm-hmm. You know, we're constantly adding to it, more exhibits, more things to explain. And, you know, it's been a powerful outreach here at the Creation Museum, and we expect the same thing at the Ark as we continue to expand.
Okay. And one thing that I want to know personally, I've got 4 kids, just like you do. Mine are all very young. And one of the things that my wife and I noticed when we visited with our children is there, at least when we visited back towards the very opening, there wasn't really much for young children to do. Is there plans for like a playground or anything else to get the kids' energy dispersed?
Yeah, actually, there's quite a few things, at least in the works. We were going to have a whole little area there with the playground kind of centralized. Because, you know, a lot of times kids, you know, it's like they're walking around, they're seeing this and that. Sometimes they just need to run around and have a good time.
Right.
In a safe area where you can watch them. And, you know, parents like that too. Because, okay, we can sit down, let the kids play for a little bit while we digest some of this. So, yeah, we are doing some of that. But we're also wanting to do certain kids things throughout the Ark, as well as, you know, outside. One of the things we added was the fossil find. That a lot of the kids like to do. Of course, it's wintertime and nobody wants to do that in the middle of winter, but that's kind of an outdoor activity. So we are adding some of those different features. We've done the same thing here at the Creation Museum, different aspects and elements for the kids as they go through the museum. So we do have things like that in the works, and some that's already started to come to fruition.
You came on today to tell us about your most recent book, A Flood of Evidence, but you actually have right here on the table in front of us, you have a ton of other books that you've written. Some of my favorites, the World Religions and Cults trilogy, How Do We Know the Bible is True, Demolishing Supposed Bible Contradictions, Confounding the Critics. Those are all my favorites because I'm very much into evangelism and apologetics. You've also written other stuff, a book focused on the Tower of Babel, something about the war on Christmas, which would have been good, you know, back when Christmas time was coming. It's past Christmas as this is airing, but something to remember for next Christmas. And a book that I haven't read yet, but I'm definitely intrigued by, is called The Fall of Satan. So very briefly, tell us a little bit about your other book selections.
Oh, boy, I've been on a lot of books. Probably one of my more popular books has been The Tower of Babel. Did a book and a DVD on that, you know, where it talks about the different people groups and where they went to all around the world. But, you know, I've been involved in other books, Flood Legends. I was involved in a book on that. Dragons, Legends and Lore, Dinosaurs. I've been on fold-out books. I've been in kids' books, teen books. I've been involved in adult books. I've been involved in a lot. And, of course, we have more coming. We like to you know, hit all levels, hit all ages, and try to fill those niches that we just need a little bit more in. So be praying for us as we put out more resources, and, you know, pray the Lord receives the glory in all this as well.
Bodie, where can people go to get more information about you, and if they need to contact you for speaking or questions?
Yeah, I would hop on our website, answersingenesis.org. Again, that's answersingenesis.org. And, you know, you can find these resources there. You can read more about my bio, a little more extended information there. You can get a hold of a lot of the DVDs that I've been involved with as well. And I know here at the Ministry of Answers in Genesis, we have a number of speakers. You know, Ken Ham still goes out. We've got Brian Osborne, Terry Mortensen, Tommy Mitchell. We've got a whole lineup of different people. You know, I go out from time to time, but they can find all that on our website, answersingenesis.org.
Okay, very cool. And if you want, audience, any of these resources that I've just listed that Bodie's written, go to witnesstalkradio.org/AIG, and that will take you right to the bookstore. So again, Bodie, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Hey, it's great to be on the show, and God bless you and keep up the great work.
One quick thing that I want to talk about, after the fact, because this interview was done a couple of months ago, is right now, as I record this, it's March 3rd, and Bodie Hodge has recently had some health issues. And I would just ask that you would pray for Bodie, that he would make a full and speedy recovery. Pray for his family, his wife, and his children, and pray that this would all be used to glorify God. You could win a free book, A Flood of Evidence, signed by the authors Bodie Hodge and Ken Ham. Go to witnesstalkradio.org by March 31st, 2017 to sign up for the giveaway.
And thank you, listeners, for coming to another episode of Witness Radio. Visit witnesstalkradio.org to find the show notes and leave feedback. Don't forget to join us on social media and share this episode with your friends. Now that the show is over, it's time for you to go. That is, to go into all the world and proclaim the gospel. May God bless you.
This show has been a production of the Muniak family. Please pray for us as we continue to minister in the tri-state area and around the globe with Christ-centered programs.